Position to Win is a community for women who are on a journey to put themselves in position to win, in pageantry and in life. On the Position to Win podcast, current and former local, state, national, and international title holders from various systems give you insight into their journeys, tips and tricks, and of course, authentic, unfiltered conversation. Here you will find the motivation you need to take up space, shatter glass ceilings, serve with intention, and fiercely chase crowns. This is not just for pageant girls. This is where we find what we need to put ourselves in position to win. I'm your host, Jada Samuel. Hello, and welcome back to Positioned to Win. I am so excited that joining us from the Midwest is Miss Kansas 2019 and 2020 artist, speed painter, motivational speaker, life coach, all of the things. Annika Wooton, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. So excited to join you today.
I am so excited to have you on. I have followed you since your time as Miss Kansas, and it's been incredible watching you go throughout that time as a title holder during the pandemic and just transition into life after the crown. So I am excited to go through all of the things today, and we have to start with your pageant journey. It is the most incredible story. I know that you competed for the title of Miss Kansas for 7 years in a row. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in pageantry, what led you to compete and continue competing?
Oh my goodness. Well, I started competing in competitions, I would say similar to the ethos of Miss America. It was called the Preteen America competitions, like my very first introduction. And they would be, safe to say it was not a pageant, but it was a scholarship competition at the ripe age of 7 years old. And, got my practice speaking in front of people. There was a talent competition and that sisterhood and competitive edge. So that was my little toe dip. And then it was the Miss America's Outstanding Teen, like our perfect feeder competition. Someone from my local community ran a local pageant, invited me to be a part of it, and I was hooked. I mean, everything about the Miss America organization feeds into areas that I'm passionate about, whether that was community service or performing on stage, or, I was very interested and engaged in school. So that's what really perked my interest, was just that simple invitation to join the community and be on stage. And like I said, I got hooked. I saw the vision. I saw what I could gain from the organization as well as what I could give back. And so when I started college, it was the goal to become Miss Kansas. And 7 years later, it happened.
Oh my goodness. I absolutely love that story. And I love that you talk about Miss America's Outstanding Teen being the feeder competition. I think it's so cool when people have that story, because that's not my story. So I love that you continued on and just kept going to get to the goal of Miss Kansas. And then the pandemic happens and you're like competing for Miss America. Did you compete at Miss America prior to the pandemic? Was it right before the pandemic? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so
how was your experience? Yeah. How was your experience at Miss America?
At Miss America, yeah, literally probably hindsight, if we could have known what was coming, it would have been a completely different perspective. But it was December of 2019 where the world shut down in March of 2020. So just a couple months later. And to be quite frank, our organization has been going through some major changes in the last several years. And that competition, so Miss America 2020, had some of those very significant changes, one of which was that it was in Connecticut for the first time. The pitch was introduced as an area of competition. A lot of the areas of tradition that had happened in Atlantic City were no longer a part of the experience. So, I don't think it's a secret that our experience was very different than we expected it to be, which was admittedly disappointing on some levels. I was really looking forward to the Show Us Your Shoes parade and some of those Atlantic City traditions and iconic moments. But I think any experience is what you make of it. And so Absolutely. I tried to go in with that perspective of, regardless if it's not what I thought Miss America was going to be like, it's still Miss America. Like I am still here after 7 years of trying for this opportunity. I truly believe that you're made for the moment that you're made for. And whether that was that moment at Miss America or the 2 years of reigning, that it ended up being, I believe that I was put in that position for a reason.
Absolutely. I totally believe that. Not only were you put in that position, but you placed top 15 at that competition during a year of transition. And I think that's really commendable, like walking into something that you don't really know what to expect and then making the most out of it and accomplishing what you did was absolutely incredible. So I want to move into a really cool thing. So I loved your talent. You painted Ruth Bader Ginsburg at Miss America, and I have a very different talent. We've seen more of it in the last couple of years, but I do a dramatic monologue. And so I love when people don't have your typical singing, instrument, dancing kind of talents. So can you tell me about how your time as Miss Kansas kind of elevated you as an artist and a professional and what that experience was like?
Yes. Well, being called into the top 15 at Miss America was such a surreal moment. And I was the last name called in the top 15. So, like you're standing on stage and every name that you call, you're like, please say Kansas, please say Kansas. And then it's that last spot and you're like, it could be me or the journey could be over. And I just remember like sinking as soon as Mario Lopez said my name, said it incorrectly, I might add. But that moment was such a culmination of, like you said, so much hard work, especially in a year where there were so many pivots. And part of that journey was my speed painting and getting painting down to a 90-second routine, which truthfully only ever happened on stage. Everywhere else that I've painted has not had the 90-second limit, thank goodness. But throughout my term as Miss Kansas, I was on the road painting for schools, charity events, different appearances, and allowed me to bring something new to the role of Miss Kansas, something that has very rarely been seen really across America, but across the world, there's not many speed painters. And so that just created a different kind of avenue for me to express myself. And going back to the fact that I served during the pandemic, painting was a really, really neat talent to translate across Zoom screens or to be able to record and send that demonstration and that performance into virtual events that were happening. Whereas dancing and singing, obviously still wonderful, but we're a little bit different across a Zoom screen. So I was really able to capitalize on that and have continued my career path as a speed painter to this day. Literally this weekend, I was in Kansas City painting at our Union Station right after our Super Bowl win and did a really, really neat portrait of Patrick Mahomes. So it's something that served me very well as my time as a title holder and has also continued to serve me as I carve out different creative careers that I hold on to.
I love that. I am holding on to the part where you talked about pivoting because we know that we've all had to pivot, but you were a state title holder during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So you served 2 years, and I find that it's sometimes, until you are comfortable showing up authentically, it's hard to be on all the time. Mm-hmm. And even if you are showing up authentically, sometimes it's still hard to be on all the time and just ready to be a title holder, but to do it for 2 years straight and to make sure that people are still interested in the organization, ensure that people are still interested in you and the work that you were doing. I would have been exhausted. Did you find yourself showing up more authentically or blurring the lines between Miss Kansas and Annika during that time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because when I reflect, I think it was very intuitive for me to just step up on social media when the world shut down. And I recognize that for me was very natural, and it does not come naturally to everybody, whether it was expressing myself just through the images and the captions that I was posting, or I started live art corners. So twice a week when we were all stuck in our homes, I was painting with people on Facebook and Instagram. And so that was just innately, I turned to the arts, I turned to my way of expressing myself to make connections with people. But when it came to my role as Miss Kansas, I was very, very interested in continuing connections with our current class of title holders to keep them engaged, to try and keep our sponsors and partners as engaged as possible throughout that dead time, really, of no kind of energy or movement or momentum of what's happening in the pageant space. So it really came back to, how do you foster those personal connections and make things be and seem authentic on social media so that our different groups of stakeholders stay engaged and involved. But I do think not only with the pandemic, but a lot of the social movements that were happening throughout that time, I felt challenged in a way of, how do I use my voice authentically while representing a state and national organization, while going through different points of turmoil and heightened activity. And I think that there were definitely times that the lines were blurred, and times when I said, this is me saying this as Annika, and this is me saying this as Miss Kansas and representing our organization. So there were a lot of very challenging moments for different reasons, whether that be personal development or deciding what matters enough to take a stance on, or just how to carry an organization through a time that no one else has experienced before.
Absolutely. I feel like that was one of the reasons that I continued to follow you throughout your time as Miss Kansas. I personally don't follow a lot of title holders on my personal Instagram, just to separate my two worlds. But I felt like you seamlessly just blended the pageant world and who Annika was during that time. So I was in awe of the work that you were doing. And I was like, this woman is incredible. So I think it's so cool that you've gone from being the person that we watch on social media as a competitor and as a state title holder to now being a coach. You went from being coached to coaching, and you're coaching with Crown the Nation. And I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Jubin and your team it's so cool to watch what you guys have done from afar. So tell us all about Jubin and the things that you do for Crown the Nation specifically.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So Jubin is one of my dearest friends and started his journey in the Miss America organization as a local director. So he was one of my first local directors. And throughout my 7 years of competing, we worked together on and off, officially, unofficially, but then also like the years that I was not his title holder, we had to set very clear boundaries of where our friendship lied and where our competitive side was. And through that time, we learned so much about how to communicate with each other. Of course, he was coaching other title holders as well that he was directing. And we always had this vision of having a coaching business at the end of it. So once I stepped out of the Crown, we launched Crown the Nation as an exclusive pageant coaching company. And it is completely customized. We have different packages and services that we promote, but at the end of the day, we feel that the woman competing on stage, it's her, and she is leading us. We are her team to help her achieve the goals that she wants to achieve. And we cannot guarantee any kind of placement or winning, but what we can guarantee is that if you put in the work and we are your team that's helping you get to those levels, that you will come out a different person on the other side that's proud of what you've represented on stage and off stage. That's a huge part of what we talk about, is that there's two silos. It is a competition. You did choose to enter a pageant, right? But
right.
There's how all of this relates and correlates to your real life, and where those boundaries you said, like where are the blurred lines and where are the decisions that we're making distinctly for ourselves or distinctly for the competition.
I love that you talk about like, this is still real life. And I genuinely think that anyone who has ever been around pageants or has competed understands that we create so many spaces where we are learning transferable skills. So what are some of those transferable life lessons that you feel all girls should aim to walk away having learned from being coached or participating in a pageant?
I think just from participating in a pageant, you learn how to represent yourself in lots of different arenas, whether that's, like we say, the classroom or the boardroom or the interview room. You learn how to speak to so many different people, and especially strangers. You know, young people in general don't have a lot of exposure to just going up to unfamiliar humans and having educated conversations with them or purposeful conversations. And I think that's a sense of confidence and integrity that women in pageants have an explicit opportunity to develop at such a young age. I think another area is really discovering what you're passionate about and what you care about and
That's
how to make a difference, right? Like I don't know, there's so many young people or people that I see in my stage of life and various stages as I've grown up that don't have that same sense of purpose that we're afforded at such a young point in our careers, I guess. Now, on the flip side of that, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is where does that translate beyond the pageant journey? Because to be a young person who's experienced so much success at such a young age, then going into a quote unquote normal career trajectory is how you hold on to those particular skills or facets or passions and then translate those back to real life in a way that's still meaningful for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love all of those points because I just want those to like sink into every girl that I meet. It's like brain and heart and spirit and soul, because I'm like, this is so much bigger than you winning or losing. And I want everyone to have that same understanding about pageantry and about these competitions. So oftentimes on this podcast, we talk about winning when the crown is no longer on your head and the sash is no longer across your body. You started your own arm of life coaching within the Crown the Nation brand.
Yes.
That kind of thing. That's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Called Beyond the Crown. Mm-hmm. And ladies and gents, this is so cool. I have read every long blog paragraph post that you have put on Instagram because, you know, I am competing and I do think about life after the crown, and I want other people to think that positively about life after the crown. So I'm a huge fan of those posts. So I need for everyone else who is listening to this podcast episode to know what Beyond the Crown is. Can you tell me all about Beyond the Crown and what led you to create it?
Yeah. The moment that it all came into focus was the very last time that I competed, which was not Miss America. Once I aged out and finished my term as Miss Kansas, I chose to throw my hat in the ring one last time for Miss Kansas USA and didn't win again.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that a vast majority of the women who compete in pageants will never win the title that they were hoping to achieve. And that is like a really important thing to sit with. And so I was standing in the back of the stage clapping and realized that all of a sudden the winner gets swept away in all of this excitement and glory and sparkle, and everyone else walks away not with nothing, right? But without that kind of support and team camaraderie. Exactly. Even the outgoing title holder, having experienced that recently, the new girl is crowned and you walk away and all of a sudden you're not her anymore. And that is a distinct area of mental health that has not been addressed within the pageant community. And of course, we've had a lot of more conversations surrounding mental health in pageants in the last several years from extreme outcomes that shouldn't have happened in the first place. So that's where Beyond the Crown was birthed, to support that transition from competing or reigning to normal life again. And how do you define what sets your heart on fire and what that looks like without a crown attached to it? Whether you've aged out and you've never achieved the title you were working for, or if you're now a forever instead of a Miss whoever, and you're trying to find that purpose and significance. Or if you're still competing and you really do want to have that larger perspective that is beyond the stage area of competition, there's a different kind of approach that we can take to kind of set that framework so that hopefully when the pageant journey is over, the transition back to real life isn't quite as stark.
I love that. And again, I'm hoping that everyone who listens to this episode takes a deep dive into some of your posts and goes to read more about Beyond the Crown, because some of your posts have been therapeutic for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing all that you end up doing with Beyond the Crown and all of those people that you end up impacting for sure. Another thing that I love about your social is how often you talk about your therapy journey. A lot of people aren't open about their therapy journeys, and I don't think that people have to be, but that's something that you've chosen to share with your audience. And I feel that a lot of therapists, similar to the way that athletes, when they're done playing the sport, there aren't a lot of people who understand that mentality and understand that mindset. So when young women are done with pageantry, I feel like sometimes it's maybe even harder for those who are, therapists or licensed counselors to understand where their mindsets are. What are some of the ways that you've been intentional about caring for your mind and body and spirit after this major phase of your life has come to a close? And what kind of suggestions do you have for other people who may be experiencing something similar?
Yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate to have some very incredible therapists. I started going to therapy regularly pretty soon after I came back from Miss America, and actually found a therapist that was focused in art therapy. And so that was something for me that obviously I relate to as a way to express myself and kind of figure out ways to tap deeper past what I thought I was thinking. And now have explored a therapy called EMDR therapy, which I talk about on my social media a little bit. So when it comes to therapy, there's definitely something to be said about doing research, vetting your therapist, kind of going through first date syndrome with different therapists, and knowing like the first person that you find doesn't have to be your therapist. You can kind of shop around and you're not going to offend them because that's their business. So there is a therapist out there for everyone, and there's different kinds of therapy that's not just talk therapy. And so if you do some research, Psychology Today is a great resource to find out different ways to support the way that you function and the way that your brain works. And that's different for everybody. But as far as how I personally take care of myself, I've actually discovered that, contrary to popular belief for many pageant girls, I'm an introvert. At my core, I'm very much an introvert. I love people. However, when I need to reset and rejuvenate myself, it is typically by myself. So finding ways that I can do that amidst a very busy, public, extroverted life. So one of my ways is driving. I've really isolated driving, if that's a conversation with a friend, jamming out to music, a podcast, like a true crime podcast versus a professional development podcast, or just sitting in silence with my own thoughts. Whatever I need, like my car is my little safe bubble that no one else is in. So like no one else has control over the stereo, And it's stuff like that. If you can really tap into the ways that you can replenish yourself and the ways that you really do need care, and then identifying ways that you can provide that for yourself. You don't have to rely on anyone else or any other factors to be able to truly take care of your soul.
I love that. Well, I have one question that I ask every single person that comes on to the Position to Win podcast. And it is a question that I know that you are going to be able to answer, because I see it in the way that you are living out your life on social media. So how has pageantry put you in position to win?
Yeah. Ooh. So I think about my very first year competing for Miss Kansas, and I say, winning would have been a dream, but it was one of those dreams that I could only see the crown and the audience clapping for me and the win, right? And by the time I got to year 7, I had understood who I was and what I was bringing to the table. And I understood a lot more about the organization itself. And it was like one of those dreams that you wake up from and you remember every single detail and you know exactly what happens. And I knew where I fit into the picture and the legacy that I wanted to leave. And so had I won on that first year, that would have been great. That would have been life-changing for 18, 19-year-old me. But to win on year 7, after having experienced 7 years of opportunity and mentoring and community and development, that put me in a position, sure, to win Miss Kansas. But I knew that if I hadn't have won that title, I was still in a position to win throughout the rest of my life because of the skills that I had developed and the people that I had met and the way that my life had been changed throughout a very unique opportunity that I chose to pursue success.
I love that answer. I love that answer. And I hope that that's something that you take with you throughout the rest of your day, today, and the rest of your life. I know that it is something that you carry with you because you talk about beyond the crown and living life beyond the crown. So I know that you are in position to win in so many other areas of your life because of that. I am so grateful that you joined me. Tell the listeners how they can book you for a virtual experience, how they can follow you, how they can keep up with you, get in touch with you, all of those things.
Yes. So I'm blessed with a unique name. So you can pretty much find me with my name on all platforms. Annika Wooton or AnnikaWooton.com is where all of my bookings go through. So you can check out some of my speed paintings and also my blog. So I share a lot of my blog content on my social media as well. But if you're interested in long form content, it don't take that long to read, but different insights into life as a former, my therapy journey. I just had eye surgery recently, so I go through that, but I'm always sharing different things about my life and my perspective on pageantry now that I am beyond the crown.
I love it. Make sure you all follow her and make sure you all follow Position to Win. You can find us on Facebook.com/Positioned to Win. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Positioned to Win. And you can also subscribe to us on YouTube if you search Position to Win, or visit our website, positionedtowin.co, not .com. And of course, you can listen to us on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Subscribe to us there as well. And while you're at it, be sure to give us a rating and comment on the YouTube video if you are watching. Thank you again for listening. And thank you, Annika, again for joining me.
Yes.
And everybody, go win.